Hi everyone, this is Quotidian Light and welcome to Ear Stretching 101. First, this video is primarily about stretching your ears. This is in response to several questions I've been getting in a previous ear stretching video. And so, well actually no, it was a tongue stretching video, but I've been getting questions about ears on that video. If you are curious about my history with ear stretching, why I stretch my ears, I recommend you see the video, What's Up With My Ears. I will include the link in the down bar. But first, I have been stretching my ears since 1993. I started stretching my ears when, right before I turned 18. And my very first stretch, I was going from just a regular pierced earring that I had had since I was an infant. And I was stretched using tapers at a very famous piercing studio, one of the original piercing studios in the United States. My first stretch was done at the Gauntlet in San Francisco, which is no longer in existence. After that, I made friends with several people, including the owner of Body Manipulations, which was another piercing studio that was very influential in piercing and modern primitive movement in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and the gentlemen that run Nomads. I was always on the cursory of those, of that community, and being on the cursory of that community, I was able to benefit from a lot of the knowledge that they were developing, the techniques that they were developing without necessarily getting in the trouble they were getting into. So what I'm saying comes from years of experience. It does not come from me being a piercer. I am not a piercer. In fact, I have issues with piercers taking care of stretched ears in some situations, and I will go into that in this video. But what I am saying is that this comes from my personal experience of 20 years of stretching ears, 21 years of stretching ears. I will first talk about the ways to pierce your ears if you know in advance that you're going to be stretching them. I will talk about the healing times, and then I will talk about where you go from there. I've had two different techniques of having my ears pierced. I had my ears pierced originally, and then after I had an incident with chaos plugs, my ears completely closed from 1 inch. They'd been 1 inch for, I don't know, a decade, almost 6 years, something like that. And my ears closed over completely on one ear and almost completely on the other. And so my second time I had my ears done, I had them cut. And we will talk a little bit about when you're going to cut your ears, the history behind cutting your ears, and what to expect, because I ran into some things that were really surprising. It was a fairly new technique when I had it done. It was the first time my particular piercer had cut that much, and we definitely learned some things in the process that I would like to share with people. So first, if you know you're going to stretch your ears, what do you do? Well, I had my ears stretched from original piercing holes, and unfortunately they were puncture holes. They were not done at a piercing studio. There's a difference when you get your ears done at a piercing studio. I have a piercing needle around here somewhere, but I couldn't find it. A piercing needle is a hollow needle, and typically it's slanted. If you look at the tip, it's hollow. Let me grab a pen and paper here. It's a hollow needle, and instead of being a circle like that, it is like that, okay? So it's longer on the top and it's shorter on the bottom. So when it goes into the ear, it actually pierces the skin and either cuts a flap or actually removes a small amount of skin. This has several benefits if you're going to be stretching your ear in the future. One, it's way less traumatic to heal. Holes that have been pierced with piercing needles typically heal a lot faster, and they heal with a lot less scar tissue than puncture holes. So if you just went down and got your ears pierced at Claire's and they used a piercing gun, if that's a newer hole, I actually recommend taking the earrings out, letting it heal over, and getting your butt to a piercer and getting your ears done that way. A lot of people that have had their ears pierced years, decades previously. If it was done with a gun, often they will have issues with their ears. They'll have like a knot in their ear, which is scar tissue. Their ears may flare up periodically because there's no air circulation getting in, and the skin just has a really hard time staying healthy from a puncture wound. While as with more of a cut wound, it heals much faster and much smoother. The other thing you can do if you know you're going to want to stretch your ears in the future is get your ears done with a dermal punch. I had an ex-boyfriend that wanted to get his ears stretched, and that's what we did for him. I took him down to body manipulations, and we got his ears pierced with a dermal punch. I think his initial piercing was a 10 gauge. The benefit of that is he gets the feeling of having plugs in right away. So sometimes what happens is you get your ears pierced, you know you're going to stretch your ears, and it's really hard to wait that first 8 months, year until you can stretch again. And typically the piercing studio will say, hey, you can stretch in 6 months, which I don't necessarily agree with. And so what happens is people stretch too soon, they get kind of addicted to it, they go a little too fast, and they run into trouble. Because he was able to get his ears done with a dermal punch right away, he was wearing plugs, it felt like he was wearing plugs, he didn't feel like he was wearing earrings, and it kind of like calmed that itch a little bit. And also the benefit of getting it done at an actual piercing studio is because most piercers have had experience with pierced lobes, not all, but most, they're much more careful about getting the hole centered. Or if you have slightly irregular earlobes, they may want to pierce up or over slightly to allow for extra meat, for lack of a better word, at the bottom side or in the inside of the earlobe. And those are areas where a lot of times people will get their ears pierced. It'll be slightly uneven, and then when they start to stretch, they'll run into problems later on. Those problems may not even come from something they've done. Those problems may be from the fact that the original hole was not in the best location for their ears if they're going to start growing their earlobes. So that's something to think about. So the first bit of advice is if you're just getting your ears pierced and you know you're going to pierce and you know you're going to stretch your ears, go to a professional and get that done. When you go into a professional, you want to go to someone who has experience with stretched ears. If they have stretched ears, great, but that's not necessarily a barometer, okay? I've walked into more than one piercing studio where the piercer had stretched ears and their ears were jack. So when you go in, if they have stretched ears, look at their stretched ears. How healthy do they look? Do they look red? Do they look crusty? Do they look uneven? Those are all things that you are going to give you a hint. If you find a piercer that doesn't have stretched ears, but they have really good experience, they're willing to take the time, you know, they've studied, they've been a piercer for a decade, then go for it. You're going to have a much better experience getting those initial holes done than you will going to the mall and having some kid with a piercing gun piercing your ears. In addition, it's more sanitary, less infection risk, it's just healthier all around. If you've had your ears pierced since you were a small child, I still recommend going to a piercing studio and getting your ears looked at. Ask them specifically, are these holes in a good location for me to start stretching my ears? Some piercers are not going to really be able to tell you, but a really good piercer who's been around for a long time will be able to look at those holes and tell you if they're even, if they're too low, if they're too close to the head, or if they need to be redone. If you've had those holes for a long time, they may suggest letting them close up and piercing new holes. If you've held your holes long enough that they're not going to actually close up, then you may want to look at getting your ears cut. Cutting will do a couple things. Cutting your ears will, get you to a bigger size quite quickly. It is the original way that earring holes were done in the Maasai tribe in Africa and several other smaller tribes. So people that tell you, oh, cutting your ears is cheating, they don't know what they're talking about. You really need to look at the history of how these body modifications were originally done to understand the history of cutting. Cutting has a very long history. It's hard to find somebody who's good at it. It's technically not legal in all of the United States. If you know a good piercer, if you're friends with a good piercer, you can find somebody. If you're just walking off the street and they don't know you from Adam, you may have a harder time finding somebody. But if your original earring holes are not even or too close to the head or too far down, too close to the bottom of your earlobe, cutting is a good option to actually replace your holes so that when you start stretching your ears, the pressure is placed on a non-weakened part of the earring hole. The goal of stretching your ear is to have equal pressure on all sides of the hole. If at any point you have more pressure on the inside or the bottom of the hole, that's where you run into people who's gradually over time, their earlobe will start to thin. If you have equal pressure as you're stretching your hole, you will gradually grow new skin as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and your earring hole, your actual stretched ear, will be nice and meaty all the way around. When I take out my earring, okay, if I take out my earring and I show you my ear is meaty all the way around. If I were to have plastic surgery and have this closed up, it would not close up without actually removing skin, because over time, as I've stretched my hole, new skin grows. So I actually have more earlobe now than I started out with. That's important to think about. People all the time ask me, I want to stretch my ears. How do I do it? And I don't want to stretch it enough that my ear won't go back to normal. That question always rankles me a little bit, because for me, stretching my ears is a really spiritual aspect of my life. It's something that I've been doing for a very long time. I have a lot of feelings around my ears. I will always have stretched ears. And I've always kind of felt like if you don't think you will be happy with your ears as an old person, you shouldn't be stretching your ears. It's not an aesthetic thing. But at the same time, I recognize that for some people it is. And as a Buddhist, I really shouldn't be judging people. So for people that say they want to stretch their ears and they don't want their ears to get big enough that it won't go back, I say anything over 2 gauge, stay away from. Anything under 2 gauge, it may not shrink all the way back, but it'll shrink back enough you can wear regular earrings. So that's just in general. Occasionally you'll run into somebody who it won't shrink back, but that's pretty rare. Now, as far as you've already got your ears pierced, your piercer has told you you can start stretching your ears in, 3, 4, 6 months. What do? First, this is going to be controversial. I actually do not recommend allowing a piercer to stretch your ears for you. I think having a piercer in the beginning who can make sure your original piercing holes are placed in proper position is really important. When I got my ears cut, I had my hole slightly moved, and my stretching experience after having my ears cut was much smoother and easier than my original stretching experience. I think having that second set of eyes on your original holes is invaluable. But piercers pierce skin. They are used to seeing wounds. Most piercers have a different view of your skin than the average person who stretches ears does. If you have stretched ears, every single time you get a tear in your earlobe, you are developing scar tissue, and that scar tissue can and most likely will eventually catch up with you. It will make stretching your ears harder in the future. It will make your ears discolored if you get big enough. Sometimes you can actually see scar tissue on certain people's ears. In the short term, it can make your ears irritated, flaky, red, not happy. Years ago, I knew a girl that actually only had one earring stretched. And when I asked her what happened to her other earring, she stretched her ears. She got a microscopic tear. She got an infection in that tear. And guess what? It turned into staph. She almost lost her whole ear, but she only lost like the lobe. And so, yeah. The reason why I do not recommend allowing a piercer to do your initial stretches is the only time I have ever seen people tear their ears when they've done it the right way is when they've gone to a piercer. I'm just going to say it, because the piercer does not have the automatic feedback. If you are putting a taper through your own ear, you can feel when it's tight. You can feel when it's warm. You can feel if you're moving too fast. If you're doing it to somebody else, you have none of those sensations. In addition, piercers, on average, don't see anything wrong with piercing skin. They pierce skin all the time. So they will say, some of them, and I've heard them say it, I'm going to stretch your ears, and then you're just going to wait 6 months for it to heal. And this makes me grab a table and want to scream, because if you've stretched your ears slow enough There shouldn't be anything to heal from. Your ear should not have opened up at all. You should not have fine line tears in the skin. The goal of stretching your ear, from my perspective, is to gradually get your ear to stretch itself. So you're wearing these earrings, you're massaging them, you're oiling them, and gradually the skin is repelling from your earring. So here's your earring. Here's your earlobe, okay? You're taking care of your ear really good, and over time your earlobe will actually grow away from the earring. And when you pull down, you'll be able to see a little bit of light in there. That's when you know you're ready to go up to the next size. And if you've waited long enough and taken good enough care of your earlobes for that to happen, then you're not actually stretching your ear. You're just putting in the actual size that's already there. That's how I view stretching your ears optimally. I feel like you should be taking care of your ears enough that your ears are gradually stretching on their own. And every time you go up a size, you're not actually stretching your ear. You are filling up the new space with the new size so that your ear will continue to grow away from the earring. This happens a little bit less with steel. I don't know why. For some reason, steel and titanium, it seems like your skin stays tight around those a little longer. But in my experience stretching, once your ear hole is healed, wearing wood or wearing stone, your ears will gradually move away from the actual earring, and they will stretch on their own. In addition, taking good care and waiting long enough. That's all it takes, is waiting long enough. So you may have to wait a year. You may have to wait a year and a half before your first stretch. And that's okay. It's going to be healthier in the long run. During that year and a half, you should be massaging your ears every single day. Once the actual wound is closed up, I do recommend daily ear massages. You can use any type of oil. Like right here, I've got rose body oil. I've used that. I've used castor oil. But the best oil for this that I found has been emu oil. I don't think it's overhyped. It's really emollient, and it really it helps keep down any kind of scar tissue, and it gets your earlobes nice and flexible and prepared for the stretch, which is really good. So what are the different ways to stretch your ear? Now that you've decided you're not going to go to a piercer for those initial stretches because you want to go nice and slow, you want to make sure that it's not done too quickly, how do you actually do it? So if you're going to go the taper route, which I don't necessarily recommend unless you're really experienced, because it is super easy to stretch too fast with tapers. There's two kinds of tapers. Okay, here's just your regular run-of-the-mill tapers. I get all of my body jewelry supplies at BAF Body Art Forums. And I'll include another link in the down bar. I may not get the link there until later because I'm probably going to upload this while I'm at work, so just be patient. So this is the regular type of taper. That's a taper. Typically what you do, you lube it up with either a Happy Fun Time lube or oil, push it through, and then you follow it with an earring. I don't recommend this for stretching your ears. I also don't recommend this for new people that aren't experienced with these. So it's really easy to get this part through, and then when you go to follow it with an earring, oftentimes you have a hard time getting the earring to go through, and you can actually rip your ear because you're trying to fiddle and trying to get it to go through the hole, and it won't go through. The kind that I recommend for everybody, if you're going to use a taper, is this kind. See that? It screws. It has a screw. So this actually screws to your earring, and then you push this through and it follows right through. The reason why I recommend this is because it's seamless. You're not going to run into an issue where the taper goes in really easy and then you're ripping your ear because you can't get the earring in. The earring will just go right in, and it's really seamless. Why don't I recommend tapers? Again, the reason why I don't recommend tapers is because you are moving an entire size in one go. So unless your ear is already partially stretched on its own, you can stretch too much even with a taper. And I have to be realistic. The average person is not waiting a year between stretches to have their ear stretch on their own. So creating the least amount of irritation and damage as possible is really important. That's why I recommend tape. Tape is a great thing. Here I've got two kinds of tape. This is bondage tape. that you can get this on Amazon. You can get this at your Happy Fun Time store. If you're underage, you're going to stick to Amazon. This is plumber's tape. It's white. It doesn't stick to anything but itself. You get this at Home Depot or your average hardware store in the plumbing section. It's used to go around the threads of pipes to seal. There are some issues as far as some people feel this may not be ultimately healthy because it is a chemical. But at the same time, and also it can be hard to get it to stay on your earrings. This, some people have issues with at the smaller sizes because you can only do one layer. And so sometimes the seam where the two ends come together can be a little sharp. But these are the two tapes that most people are going to be using. I will admit I have used electrical tape in the past because in the 90s, that's just what we did. I don't recommend it because the tape can actually get in the glue can get in the holes and cause irritation. Also, it's thicker, so you're going up more size each time you add tape. So you can start taping your earrings in the very beginning. It may be a little fiddly, but you can tape your earrings in the beginning. And the reason why I recommend tape is because you can literally, instead of going up an entire gauge, okay, this is going to make you go up an entire gauge. There's a 1 gauge difference between the end of this taper and the back of this taper. This one you can go up in fractions. So remember how I was saying when you put your earring in, your ear is gradually growing away from the earring. So what you do is you add 1 layer of this and then you wait. And a week later you'll find you can add another layer and then you wait. Then you add another layer and you wait. And so instead of going up an entire size in one sitting, you can really take your time and go up over the course of a month or 2 months. And your ear, I find that the ear tends to grow away from tape really well. So you'll find that you put tape on it and your earring gets loose. And so there is this preconception that dead stretching is really, really bad. And it is because most people don't do it right. But done correctly, you're not actually stretching. You're only putting in the size of the earring that your ear already is. You're doing the stretching through the massaging and the care of your ears and the waiting, the time. You see people that have had earrings their whole lives, and then you take their earring and you pull down and there's all that air. That's because the ear has actually stretched away from the earring. And when you use tape, you're taking advantage of that. You're putting tape in there and your ear is saying, ooh, there's something in there. I don't like that. And it's moving away from it. And so you put more tape in there and gradually your ear will just grow on its own. It may take a month of taping. It may take only a week of taping. My ears tend to stretch really quickly. So whenever I would go up a size, I would put like 1 layer of tape each day over the course of maybe 2 weeks to go up to the next size. The larger you get, the bigger difference between sizes there are. So the difference between a 14 gauge and a 12 gauge is really small compared to the difference between 1 inch and 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches. It's a bigger difference. So, what was I going to say? Oh, I dropped the taper. That was cute. So, for the new person who just recently got their ears pierced, wait. The longer you wait and the better you take care of your ears, the better experience you're going to have stretching your ears, the healthier they're going to look. You want to make sure your ears look as good as possible because eventually you're going to be an old person with stretched ears, and what may look cute jacked up as a kid is not going to look cute jacked up as a 40-year-old. Trust me. Having stretched ears will give you decades of enjoyment. Okay? Enjoy the earrings. Enjoy the journey. It's just like dreads. It's just like any other long-term spiritual journey. You will discover things about yourselves. I have met people that started stretching their ears because they thought it was cool. And 15 years later, they're really emotionally tied to their ears. They've learned so much about their body. They've become more in tune with their body in the course of stretching their own ears. I guess the final lesson to this, because I'm sure this was really rambling. I'm looking at the time. I'm at 25 minutes, and this was going to be a quick video, so I'm sorry. The takeaway is, The longer you wait and the more you care for your ears now, the better off you're going to be in the long term. The happier you're going to be with your stretching experience. Because scar tissue created now will hinder your stretching later on. Scar tissue doesn't stretch. The skin around the scar tissue stretches, but scar tissue doesn't stretch. So the more scar tissue you have, the harder it's going to be to stretch evenly and healthfully. The other takeaway is tapers are perfectly reasonable, but they go quickly. You're going up an entire gauge in a sitting. So again, taking your time, massaging your earlobe, creating extra space between your earring and your ear before you start to stretch them is to your benefit, because you don't want to stretch an entire gauge at one sitting. You want to stretch maybe a half or a quarter of a gauge at one sitting. The rest of the stretch will have been done previously through your regular care of your earring. What causes your ear to stretch on its own? The materials that you're using and the constant daily care of your lobes. Daily massages with a good oil is so beneficial to your ears, and it does help your ear create space and grow and really be healthy as you're wearing jewelry in your ears. That is one of the biggest benefits. When I started massaging my earlobes with emu oil, that created the biggest change in my ears compared to anything else I've done over the years, and I can't recommend it enough. I also, on this video, have said that I recommend tape over tapers, starting as early as possible. As soon as you can actually get the tape to stay on your earring, that's when I recommend starting tape, because it allows you to stretch incrementally. You can leave a layer of tape on your earring for weeks, and that gives you lots and lots of time to stretch incrementally. In general, if your piercer says you can start piercing in 6 months, add a few months to that. Double it if you can stand it. The longer you wait, the better, because the average piercer, they work with wounds on a regular basis. And if you're stretching in the healthiest way possible, you should never have a wound, ever have a wound. If you've ripped your ears, if your ear is hurting the next day, you went too fast. Your ear should not hurt the day after you stretch your ears. Your ear should at most feel slightly tight, and that's it. No stinging. I don't even recommend stinging. Some people say, oh, it'll sting just a little bit. I don't even recommend stinging. I've gotten comments on my tongue video that I went too fast. Actually, I didn't, because my tongue hole was already pre-stretched. So I actually was just putting in the new size, and the stretch was very seamless. So it's really about knowing your body and paying attention to your body and calming down so that you can hear your body. You don't want to get a message from your body and you're ignoring it because what you really want is to go up to the next size, while your body's telling you it's still really tight on the earring and it's not, you have like no space and your earring's not falling out and you've got no movement between your earring and your ear hole. You want to listen to your body and be able to see what your body's doing in an objective way. And going slow and massaging and really paying attention to your ears on a daily basis is one of the quickest ways to learn the ways that your body is talking to you. I did want to talk really quickly about ear cutting. I learned a lot getting my ears cut. I don't recommend it for everybody. It's not cheating. Trust me, it is not cheating. It is a very old technique of stretching ears. It's the way a lot of original tribes stretch their ears. And when I got my ears cut after using Chaos plugs, which I do not recommend, let me show you real quick. This is a Chaos plug. They're silicone, which is great, but what I found is they've got lots of micropores, which can cause irritation, and it actually caused my earring, my fistula, which is the inside of a hole, to slough off entirely, and then my ear closed up, which is really scary. So I don't recommend those. But when I got my ears cut, it's just a straight line and then they pop an earring in there. There's a second way of cutting where they actually go in and they trim the cartilage, which is something I will get done when I get old, because I like to go without earrings in my ears a lot. And personally, I think a rounded cartilage looks better without earrings than just a regular earring hole does. So I probably will get that done later. But the big thing that I found with getting your ears cut is your ears stretch on their own. And it's a little frightening. So in that case, if you get your ears cut, you're probably going to need to see your piercer like every week for the first couple weeks. Because literally, you'll get your ear cut, they'll put in like a 1-inch plug, and 3 days later your plug is falling out because it has released. By cutting into the skin actually relaxes and it will just stretch. And you've got to keep an earring in there that will stay in, so you don't have really a choice but to go in and get a slightly bigger earring that will fill up the hole, because otherwise your earring's just falling out and you need to keep it in there to keep the bleeding down and to help it heal. So that's a different situation. If you're going to get your ear cut and you only want to go up to 1 inch, don't do it, because you have no guarantee of what size you're going to end up with. You may only cut your ear thinking that you're going to only stretch up to 1 inch, and then literally 2 weeks later you're 1.5 inches, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your ear has stretched on its own and it's not going back. So unless you have a love affair with large lobes, don't get your ears cut. There's no guarantee. You have no way of guaranteeing what size you're going to end up when you're actually cutting your ears. And recognize that it's done without anesthesia. It's going to hurt. If someone offers to give you anesthesia, don't do it. You want to feel exactly what's going on in there. And if you don't have the pain tolerance, don't do it, because the stress chemicals in your body will prevent it from healing. You want to go to somebody that's used to cutting. So you'll probably want to go to a scarification artist or somebody, because most piercers don't have that much experience with cutting since it's not necessarily legal. And so, yeah, that's something for another video. I think that's as far as I'm going to get into it. But I just wanted to get that out there. If you're thinking that you're going to get your ears cut because you saw it in National Geographic and you think it looks gnarly and you're a modern primitive and that's an experience you want to go through as part of your coming of age or whatever process you're going through, it is out there. But know that there's no guarantee of what size you're going to go. And at the best, I recommend only cutting up to maybe 75% of the size that you kind of want to end up at, knowing that in all likelihood you're going to end up slightly bigger than that. So that is my video. This is 30 minutes. Shoot, I was not trying to make a 30-minute video, and I'm really sorry. I hope some of this helped. If it didn't, I'll try again next time. Ciao.